If you refuse a peaceful solution, you will have no choice than to surrender to a revolution. Julius Malema goes head-to-head with white community over land possession. You need to see this.
I'm very interested when you talk about we and they. We're roughly the same age. I was 12 when Madiba was released from prison, and I was 14 when the election happened. I'm a medical doctor. I work sometimes 160-hour weeks. I work sometimes 18 hours a day. And I own property because of that reason. And it sounds to me that you're suggesting that I should do all that work and come to this point in my life and now just hand away my property. And that concerns me.
You know, you are an exceptional case. If you were to stand up and say, I went to school and I'm a medical doctor and the property I have is because I went to school and I bought it. But most of your people didn't buy any property, they inherited it. So it's an exceptional case. No, you can disagree, but the reality is that you are in possession of a land that was stolen from us. And we want it back without any apology. We want that land back, and we are going to work together. I can tell you now, whether you are in denial or not, the demand for the land is growing and people are becoming impatient. And we don't want Zimbabwe here. We don't want Zimbabwe in this country. It has to be done legally, procedurally, in a manner that is not going to put the country and the economy in a disaster. We have to talk about it. We have to say, how do we, in a proper manner, make sure that everyone benefit from this land? So, you know, Mr. Santa will know, and those who were involved in the negotiations and pre-negotiations, that when it was inevitable for democracy to be ushered in, most of the corrupt state officials began to transfer land into the names of individuals. When we're building a road in Northwest, expanding a road in Northwest from Rustenburg to Mafikeng, the state had to now get into some farms so that, because they didn't have land reserves, so they had to go and take some portions of land as they go along. And then made a call. All those who were affected by our expropriation of land, please come forward so that we can compensate you. Very few people turned up. And the suspicion is that they do not have title deeds. People just declared, this is my land. Just before 1994. So, don't individualize a big problem. It's like when I say there is racism in this country and you come to me, but I'm not a racist. I'm not talking about you. If you're not racist, why are you worried? But generally there is a problem of racism. It's not about an individual. It's a group problem. It is an institutionalized problem. We have to deal with it. And if we don't talk about it, we will not recognize it as a problem. And because we have not recognized it as a problem, now we will not be in a position to solve that problem. You can't solve the problems which you have not identified. So let us not be sensitive. I mean, you are a graduate, you are a doctor, you own a piece of property. I've got a black doctor here with me, very young also, a graduate, and he owns property. We're not taking your property only. We're talking also his property, the flat he owns, a flat size. His flat is almost the size of your bathroom for sure. But even that, we're taking from him. So it's not about a black or white. All of us, we need to surrender our land to the state and give that state an opportunity to allocate it for proper use. You can shake your hand, I'm proposing a peaceful solution. You're refusing it, you will surrender it to the revolution.
At 31, Julius Malema has, by most standards, had a stellar political career. Ostentatious, outspoken and charismatic, he is widely held to have been the power broker who enabled his erstwhile hero Jacob Zuma to become South African president years ago. Raised by a single mother in the northern Limpopo province, Malema epitomizes the self-made man. How he got that wealth is the subject of much speculation, but more of that later. He joined the Masupatsala pioneer movement of the ANC when he was just 9 and is said to have received military training at 14, after which he joined the ANC's Youth League as South Africa moved beyond the apartheid era in 1994. Mr. Malema was elected leader of the ruling party's youth wing in 2008 and roused support for Mr. Zuma, infamously declaring he would kill for Zuma. But his language and tendency to explicitly exploit racial tensions. For example, in 2010, while the number of murders of white farmers mounted, he chanted an apartheid-era song which calls for blacks to shoot the Boer, white South African, while he was on the campus of the University of Johannesburg. This in the nation where a black farm worker was jailed for the 2010 murder of the white supremacist leader Eugene Terreblanche. The Shoot the Boer stunt saw Malema found guilty of hate speech by a South African court. But Tom Cargill says in a country which is still riven with deep racial and economic inequalities, Malema's style is in some ways having a positive impact. I think he served a valuable purpose in waking up people in and outside South Africa to the divisions that still exist there. Men in particular feel they have sacrificed a lot in the transition away from apartheid and have got little in return. What's happening with regards to the mine shootings there shows how little, in too many ways, the country has changed since apartheid, and that's very frightening.
So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. It was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto Wesizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map. when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. White government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto weSizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 88-89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles, and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a human.
If you found this video informative, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on the stories that shape our world. This is Adaka Africa, bringing you the geopolitics you need to know. See you in the next one.